it can influence them more directly. Like the person say, hey, go make this your priority to do this thing. And you can also go to like
Whoa. Your microphone just went crazy there for a few seconds.
draft mode and draft mode to combat. Oh, really?
Welcome to another episode of Muddled Dice. Tonight's just going to be Adam and myself. Adam was talking to me earlier about a game called Rimworld. I don't know much about it, but Adam, you seem pretty excited about it. So you wanna kind of tell the listeners what it is?
Yeah, so Rimworld is, oh man, it's pretty fun. Basically, it's a colony sort of simulator management kind of a thing.
Mm.
Um, it's basically one of the newer ones of that genre. I mean, obviously, there's others.
It
We
sounded
talked
kind
a
of
little bit
similar to
about.
Dwarf Fortress.
Yeah, so it's basically along that same genre. It's you have like pseudo control over them. Like you can influence the things that they do. You can say like basically you designate tasks that you want done, and they just kind of do them. Basically, yeah, you can influence the guys sort of like indirectly by saying like, okay, I want this task done. Like you have different workbenches and stuff where you can like craft materials. So you can go in there and you can create like a job, like, okay, I want to create this, and you can tweak the settings and stuff. And then like one of your guys who's qualified and has that like skill turned on will try and fulfill the job. You can do some like more direct stuff too, also by like drafting them, and you can do like military stuff, and just you can also like make priorities for them. So you can like select a person and say, hey, make this task your priority, and they'll basically go do it right away. So
in that
which
sense,
is
oh, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say that that's a little bit different from like Dwarf Fortress, where you really don't have any control over your guys. It's basically just a, set the tasks up and they'll complete them. It just kind of goes into the queue
Yeah.
and they try and complete it, but you don't have any real direct influence over them.
So it kind of sounds like it's the amount of influence you have is somewhere between like a real-time strategy game where you can pretty much tell them what to do, and kind of like The Sims when you're not running in free will mode, where you just kind of like you tell your sim go read a book, and then he'll get around to it when he feels like it. But if something else comes up, he'll do that instead.
Yeah, it's very similar to that, and it does have sort of that real-time strategy feel to it, which is maybe one of the things that I really like about it.
Mm-hmm.
Into that genre pretty heavily, but it's an interesting mix because it's not like The Sims is really about like controlling your character and like also like influencing their how they're living and stuff, but this is more of like a, I don't know, because it's a colony simulator, it's not just about like a specific character and controlling them directly and trying to get them to do everything. It's more like getting everything working as a unit.
Okay.
So it gives you that added thing because like everybody has to kind of be in balance. You need to have like, this guy doing the appropriate tasks for him, and then like, maybe this guy's doing something different so they're not overlap, because then your colony can collapse even though you have everything to make it work, you're doing it wrong.
Right. So it sounds when I was reading it sounded pretty interesting. And one of the things that kind of struck me about it was it sounds almost like to go back to the RTS thing. One of the things I really liked about real-time strategy games was the base building. And I was always kind of disappointed that like when you finish the mission, you started from scratch and your base was gone. But this kind of sounds like you build your base and it lasts you the whole game, right?
Well, so it's interesting because they're still developing Rimworld. Like it's still, you know, getting
Yeah, it's
updates
early
and
access,
stuff.
right?
Well, I don't know how recently, but at some point they added in different ways to win the game.
Okay.
And one of the ways to win the game is that you can travel to this other, you can travel to this ship that's landed and like basically evacuate from the planet. Like that's the whole goal, is to get your guys off of the planet. Um,
Okay.
because you know the whole concept is that they're stranded on, you know, they've crash landed, or in different scenarios, you can start with like tribal people. But so in that mode, you really have to actually travel across the world. Well, gameplay, you're playing on a set piece of the map, and you're pretty much confined to that. And then you know, travelers and stuff will come to your place and trade with you and things like that. But you also do have the option of creating caravans and basically just taking your whole colony and retransplanting it to a new location.
Oh, okay.
And then you could start a new base, but you can also take some supplies with you from the old base, which is interesting. It's a fun way to do it because sometimes you get bored with your area, or if you picked a bad location, you might want to travel to a different area.
Right, right. Okay, yeah, that sounds pretty cool actually. But you were saying it is in early access right now, isn't it?
I believe it's still in early access. I know that they said that they were going to be launching it for like console as well. So I don't know if they've
Oh,
gotten to that yet or not, or if they're still developing it. But it's, even though it's early access, it's definitely playable, and
yeah.
I mean, it's really fun. I've been playing it all day actually.
That's one of the things I've heard is like it's technically an early access game, but it doesn't feel like an early access game.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the ones that has done it well. When I
Yeah.
first played the game, I didn't buy it at first. I was just testing it out, and I mean, it was so good. I had to buy it. So I'm really happy with it. It's definitely worth the money. It seems a little pricey for an early access game because I want to say it's like $25 or $30,
Yeah.
which is the higher end of that spectrum, but it's definitely worth it. And the other thing that's great about it is they've already implemented like a good modding capability. So
Hmm.
you can go within the game and just actually load up mods. You can load mods directly from the Steam Workshop. So it works pretty seamlessly, and there's some good mods out there for it.
Oh, that's cool. Um, the other thing I read about it when you mentioned it earlier was the AI director, or I guess not director because that's Left 4 Dead. The AI storyteller they call it.
Yeah. So the way it works is like when you set up a game initially, it's pretty interesting. So you start out and you can choose between three different options where you have um, solo guy who just has like good technology, and he starts out with like extra money and like high quality gear,
Hmm.
but he's all alone. So you start out with him, or you can start out like the original mode is where you start with three survivors, and they have sort of like intermediate technology. And then the other option that they currently have is where you can start with five players, but they're tribal players. So you start out with like really basic technology. You don't even have electricity or any kind of refrigeration or anything like that that you can utilize.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and then on top of that, when you go, you can also choose a difficulty setting. So I think there's five different difficulties. And then, like you were just mentioning, there's a storyteller. So there's three different storytellers you can choose from. So there's an original one where basically it ramps up from to getting progressively harder as you know play the game longer.
Hmm.
Um, then there's two other ones. I typically play with the original one, but the two other ones are just a little bit more erratic. They can throw more and kind of go crazy. I think one of them lets you kind of like go for a while, and then it'll kind of throw a bunch of stuff at you. whereas the other one is just like almost completely random. Like you just might get all kinds of bad events, you might get all kinds of good events.
Right.
You never know what's going to happen.
So the way the storytellers work, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I've only read about it, is it's basically generating events that happen to you based on what the AI thinks would make for an interesting game, based on how you've been playing the game earlier and what your situation is, right?
I'm not sure how dependent it is on how you've been playing. But it does generate events. So that's like the main element of the game is events being generated. So when you start out, you know, for example, some of the events would be like maybe raiders are coming. You'll get drops of supplies that will just like, you know, from like crashed ships in the sky, they'll crash in the game. Like animals might attack, or you know, this rodent might go insane and start, you know, trying to eat your face off or whatever. So just sort of random events that can happen, and those are driven by the type of events that you receive, and their difficulty is dependent on the type of storyteller you choose. So
Okay.
But it kind of is at the same time. It's a difficulty setting for, you know, the events,
Right.
I guess.
Okay. So, excuse me. So it sounds like this is kind of, well, I mean, you mentioned crafting earlier. Would you describe it as open world? It kind of looks like it to me.
So it is and it isn't, because the main gameplay is going to take place on, I guess, what you could consider a tile of the map.
Okay.
The way it works is Dwarf Fortress, but it's very similar in this regard. What happens initially is when you start a new game, an entire planet is generated. I think by default it's set to only generate half the actual planet, but you can change that to also do the whole thing. But so it'll generate this planet, and then on that planet you can either choose a random location, you choose your own location that you want on the planet. And so different locations have different stats that are kind of like generated for them. Like obviously if you're in basically an ice sheet, and the types of animals and foliage and stuff that you get in that tile is going to be based on where you pick geographically.
Right.
So then you pick that tile, and that's where you basically will do everything on that specific tile. And like I said, you can relocate, so there's ways to do that as well.
Okay. So, I'm trying to think how to phrase this next question. I know what I want to ask, but it's like I can't think of how to phrase it. So before, when we did the podcast about open world crafting games, we talked about how that kind of like almost aimless play, or at least that the game doesn't provide you with goals, allows you to make your own narratives. You know, like in Minecraft and Ark and all that.
Yeah.
Would you say that in Rimworld, do you think like the narrative that you're creating is better now that, you know, since you have like guidance from the AI storyteller, or does it feel more restrictive than like Minecraft?
Well, so this is the great thing. Like, this is the separation of genres. So if you look at like Minecraft, you as the player are driving a story.
Right.
Whereas when you're playing these types of games, it's really it's a more vicarious experience. Like you are along for the ride. So it's less you driving events and more how you react to them. And so this is the thing that I think is really interesting about these genres, and I think this is where most of the fun and sort of enjoyment comes out of them, because you're really like reading a book, because you're kind of experiencing this thing as it's happening, and so this world is generated and you're just kind of going along with it, and the things that can happen are what makes it interesting. Because if you were just generating this story on your own, kind of like, you know, Minecraft, where you're doing your own thing, okay, I'm going to build a house. Well, you know, if Minecraft had events that drove everything, you know, your house might suddenly be hit by a meteor and burst into flames. And that would be arguably much more interesting, even though it's taking control away from you. So, especially with like a Dwarf Fortress, just because it's kind of like the original of this genre.
Right.
It's almost not a game. It's really more of a simulation that you are watching, and you have a certain degree of influence over. In Rimworld, you have more influence than maybe like Dwarf Fortress, but it's a similar kind of thing. And I had discussed this with you briefly about how I thought that it was very similar to like the Sims experience, where story that's generated from playing the game is really sort of the interesting point of the game. Like, it's okay, this happened to my character and I didn't expect that, and it's hilarious. Or this guy that has been my favorite character and has, you know, the best skills was suddenly, you know, shot in the head and has brain damage and basically just drools on himself all day. Or, you know, I captured a prisoner and you know, gave him peg legs and sent him back to his people, you know. So stuff like that, it's just like, it's kind of, it evolves from the story that the game creates. It adds an interest by driving your own gameplay.
Okay, so you mentioned in that Dwarf Fortress is less of a game and more of a simulation, and you said like Rimworld is kind of a simulation that you can influence more. So, so like if I'm understanding correctly, the agency in Rimworld isn't so much that, like you were saying, it's not you there experience this thing as yourself. It's almost just like a book that you can kind of nudge in different directions, almost.
It's kind of like, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like you're playing the hand of you know, destiny or fate or whatever to a degree. You have obviously this competing force of, you know, the story-driven events, which is constantly battling you, but you are influencing indirectly sort of these, you know, these people that are living out this experience in this simulated world. And, you know, it's up to you how you choose to influence them. You know, you could be the savage guy that wants to kill everybody and cannibalize and do whatever, but you reap the, you know, you reap what you sow with that. Or you can kind of be the, you know, nice guy trying to keep everybody alive and happy and be friends with everybody. And so it's almost playing God, but you're not, you don't have, you're playing God, but you're you know, the game is playing the devil. So and you're in this battle.
That's when you said you're kind of playing God. Now that I'm learning more about it, it's kind of reminded me less of an RTS and more of games like Black and White or Populous.
Yeah, so Black and White it's similar in the sense that you're sort of managing this colony.
Yeah.
I think that the difference between Black and White and a game like Rimworld is that direct influence. So like in Black and White, you can obviously like pick up a rock and crush a guy with it.
Right.
Whereas here, it's kind of like you're at the mercy of, you know, not always intelligent creatures are doing. You know, sometimes they'll just run out and do something stupid, and you just kind of have to go with it.
Right.
So you have that influence again, but you don't have that direct influence that you would have, which can be frustrating, but it also helps to create that feeling of, oh man, I'm watching. You know, it's like when you watch a good movie and you really get into it, and you feel for the characters, and then stuff happens to the characters. So that's where a lot of the enjoyment comes with these kind of games. And you can also go in and sort of like, you can get into the stats of the game. I think is one of the fun aspects of like, you can go into a character and kind of see his profiles, see what's happened to him. And one of the interesting things that's really great about Rimworld is it creates these relationships and connections and keeps track of them. So, you know, you might be having your little civilization and some pirates come along, and one of your characters could be related to that pirate, and maybe you end up fighting them and capturing the one that's, you know, related, and now the brother and sister are reunited and they're both living in your colony, and then something else happens and one of them dies, and now the one that's left alive is sad because the other one died. And so you can kind of keep track of all of that, and so it creates a depth that really draws you into the story.
Yeah.
World does really well.
Yeah. What else can we say about Rimworld?
What did you say?
I'm just like thinking what else we can say about Rimworld. Do you want to like compare it at all to Nemoria if you've played that? I know less about that even than I did about Rimworld.
Nemoria is really fun too. I've definitely played that game for a good number of hours, but so Nemoria is almost a of Dwarf Fortress, but the difference is so the main thing with Dwarf Fortress, I don't know how much you know about it, but this one guy basically created it, and he's still, as far as I know, still works on it. But it has basically no graphical interface. It's all like ASCII art, and the controls are they're just awful. There's no way else to describe it. They're terrible, but it's immensely entertaining because of all those things that it keeps track of and can happen.
Yeah.
And the depth in Dwarf Fortress is insane. Like, physics are calculated to a degree that's like, you know, your guy could potentially like slip and fall down a well, and like it's just like a minecart could be coming down a rail and hits the guy, and it calculates all of the damage that happens to him, and you know, his third joint on his finger has been destroyed or something like. So it gets to a level of depth that is super entertaining, and achieved by any of the copycat type games. But the trade-off is that you get, you know, usability and playability,
right,
and better graphics and all that. So that's basically what Nemoria is. It's a very fun game. It's it's similar to Rimworld in that like you get those interesting stories. Like a friend of mine was playing and he had this character named Mert. For whatever reason, refused to use a weapon. He would just like run around with like, I don't remember if he ran around with a log or bare fists or something, but he would just like bludgeon everything. Like anything he fought, he would kill. Like he killed a bear by himself. Like just ridiculous stuff. And so it was funny because it basically became to where like a joke between me and my friend where Mert was like the warrior god of Nemoria. And so we would build like little warrior training centers for our guys, and they'd be like, "Hail Mert!" And so it was just fun. You know, you kind of generate these stories from your game and these weird events that happen. So compared to Rimworld, it's similar in genre and style. Rimworld's nice because it gives you that sort of modern take on it, and you get obviously like guns and technology and stuff.
Right.
I like the space aspect, and you do get a little bit more of that direct control. That also some of the event-driven stuff is really Nemoria follows the style of Dwarf Fortress, where basically you get these goblin raiders, and that's against you is, I mean, obviously you still have to deal with the colony management aspect, but it's primarily just these raiders come, and then you get more raiders, and they get harder and more each time. Which the classic Rimworld does do that. That's kind of the style of the raids in classic. You also get more variety in Rimworld.
Okay. So you, as you know, someone who's been playing a lot of these kind of games, and you said like Rimworld is coming to console soon or something?
Yeah, I read something that it was getting ported over to console. I don't know all the details about it. I just remember seeing like, oh, Rimworld's really taking off. They're deciding to put it in console, and I'm not sure what all consoles they're going to be sending it to, but I imagine they'd probably do like Xbox or something like that.
So do you think this genre of game is going to take off? I mean, like right now, I can only name probably like 3 or 4 that sound similar, but do you think it's something that's going to take off the way like Minecraft did?
I definitely don't think it'll ever be as big as Minecraft, because mainly there's just not as many people that are into the genre. Like, it's a bit of a niche genre where you know, you have to be into that sort of like vicarious experience and be okay with not having the direct control. And to a certain degree, it's a game of waiting. You're kind of just watching what's happening. You do have obviously some influence, but it's mostly sort of seeing how things unfold. So I don't think as many people will ever really be into it, but I do think it's a great genre that a lot of people are really into. I mean, look at all the people that put up with the terrible controls and lack of graphics to play Dwarf Fortress.
Right.
Yeah, so it's definitely getting bigger. I don't know that there are other games that follow that style, but I think that, you know, the ones that do it really well are the ones that you hear about. So right now, I think Rimworld is on top as far as modern releases of that genre. I think that there's not really anything else competing with it on that level right now.
So would you say Rimworld is would you say it's a good entry point for someone looking to get into that genre, or is it like too overwhelming for someone who's never played that kind of game before?
Oh no, it's very very easy to get into. I definitely think it's easy to play. It's one of those like easy to play, hard to master kind of a things where. And the other thing is that it's so customizable as far as gameplay. Like, you can choose the difficulty that fits your ability. So if you're, and you can also choose like if you're the kind of person that just wants to build a base and you don't really want to have people like killing you all the time, you can choose to play that way. So which I think is good for the genre because it lets more people get involved.
Yeah, I think the easier it is to, you know, to access the game, I think that's always good for a genre. It kind of sounds like too, I mean, like, would you say it's as easy to get into as like The Sims? Would it be attractive to someone who enjoyed that kind of almost hands-off approach that The Sims, you know, just had, where you're just kind of like watching things, or is it too different?
So I think that, like, if you like The Sims and you like Sim City on strategy games, then it's like it's a blend of those. So it's not for everybody who liked The Sims, but I think that a large portion of people who like The Sims would like. But it's just a matter of, I think it's a matter of how deep into it you're willing to get as far as like exploring the story and kind of keeping track of things and getting involved in it. If you're just sort of like passively playing it and you're not really getting into the story of it, I don't think you'll enjoy it as much.
It kind of seems like,
I mean, it's even like
Go on.
Prison Architect. I mean, it's very
Oh, okay.
similar to that genre. Um, is that it's a little less management simulator and a little more survival kind of simulator, like colony survival.
Right.
So, but they're definitely related sort of genres.
I was gonna say it kind of seems like The Sims maybe could be like the gateway drug to Rimworld. You know, if you like The Sims and want something a little more involved and a little more challenging, but with a better return, pick up Rimworld. Take a
Yeah,
hit of
I mean,
Rimworld.
it there's definitely a lot of similarities as far as like the things that you enjoy about The Sims and the things you enjoy about RimWorld. Different game, like you're managing like a couple of people, maybe at most,
Yeah.
and you're really in all of their tasking and the things that it's a bit more hands off than that, and you're really a lot more at the mercy of the game. A certain technical aspect to it that I think maybe some people that played The Sims would not really enjoy, because
Hmm.
you do have to kind of get in there to a certain degree and say, okay, I want this person to do this, I want this person to be tasked with this, and kind of micromanage a little bit to get
Okay.
things running smoothly. You gotta grease that machine. Um, so, but there are, I think, a lot of people that do kind of enjoy that of how do I make this work efficiently,
Yeah.
combined with that storytelling. So
Well, I mean, you've kind of can almost convinced me to to pick it up for
I would highly
like
recommend it.
25,
Like,
30 bucks. Yeah.
especially if you've never played that genre, I think it would be really, really fun for you. Like it's so different from every other kind of game genre
Hmm.
that I think everybody should at least give it a try, see if they're into it or not. Because if you are, I mean, I've known I'm into it because I played Dwarf Fortress and learned how to play it because I
Yeah.
enjoyed that depth of the simulation. But so if you've never gotten to play that, it's a great time to break into those kind of games, because RimWorld just makes it so easy. It's really the modern in that genre.
Well, and like and Steam now, I mean, if you play for like under 2 hours in the first week, they'll give you a full refund, no questions asked, right?
Like that, it's under a certain amount of time
Yeah.
within the first week you can refund.
Yeah. So it
I've
seems like there's
refunded one game because I thought it was going to be, but I think if you get into RimWorld, you're definitely gonna spend more than that amount of time on your first play because you start to get into it, and initially you don't even realize that you're really getting attached to your characters and stuff, because you're so focused on trying to you start with nothing, so you're so focused on trying to just establish this colony and get it running,
Mhm.
that by the time you get it running and then your original players start suffering these, getting their arms blown off and they can't hold their weapon or something, and you start being like, oh no, what's happened? Oh yeah. And one of the fun things about the game and some of the other games that are similar is that you can die. You still have this like body on your hands that you have to deal with, so you can choose
Oh,
to like be one of the people that's just like, oh, I don't care about that person, like let's just cremate them or whatever. Or you can like build them a golden sarcophagus and make like an
right.
elaborate cemetery or something,
Oh,
and
that's cool.
store them there. Yeah, so that's part of that story choice where you can decide how you want to play and
Yeah.
how into it you want to get.
Cool. Well, I think now is a good time to call it. Um,
Yeah.
Thanks for being on the show, Adam. Listeners, let us know what you think of Wormworld in the comics. You recommend it. what other games are similar to it that you like. If you guys like the show, comment and subscribe. Thanks for listening.